Many of you who are familiar with my journey to be the new ED of More Light know that I am a transgender man. Since I was born female, I didn't always have this facial scruff, such that it is. However, some of you might not know that in college, I was one of the most visible lesbians on my college campus. I went to a school, the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, go Tar Heels, to be exact, with about 20,000 of my peers. So, being the most visibly identifiable queer person in a sea of undergraduates was no small feat. I was visible because, though I was female in body, I was still transgressing a lot of gender norms by shaving my head and not wearing women's clothing and strolling around on campus holding the hand of my college girlfriend, who also had a shaved head. At the time, I was just trying to be myself. I was trying to live in a world where it's okay to be a girl and walk around with a shaved head and hold hands with your girlfriend, and that could be normal. I bet some of you can relate. What I didn't expect was that my visibility would mark me everywhere I went. Towards my senior year of college, it felt like everyone knew me. People would approach me on the bus and tell me that they'd see me everywhere. When meeting new friends of friends, they would tell me that of course they knew who I was, and this was in the days before Facebook. One of the downsides of all this notoriety is that I was frequently sought out by those with something to prove. UNC had a pretty active campus crusade chapter, which is an evangelical Christian group that at the time was embroiled in a battle within the university about whether they had to admit lesbian or gay members of their leadership. I could always tell when one of their meetings let out, because inevitably someone would approach me at first kind of innocently, and then with increasing intensity about whether I knew Jesus or was saved. I already had deep theological conviction about God's love of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender folks, but I found myself tongue-tied in these encounters, suddenly feeling very vulnerable and altogether too visible. I realize now that what happened is I developed a fear of strangers. I started scowling more and hunching my shoulders to give off the "don't talk to me" vibe, to shield myself from strangers' reactions or prying questions. I wonder if this is how Cleopas and his friend might have felt on the road to Emmaus. It's dark, far from the lights of the city, and a stranger approaches. Did it run through their minds that this person might not be friendly? That this person might have been one of the very people calling for Jesus' death the night he was crucified? The two of them cast down their eyes when the stranger talks to them. Was it in grief for their lost hero or fear of provoking an attack? In the silence that hangs between when Jesus first approaches and when Cleopas responds to his question, I hear the heartbeat that thumps in our chests when we face a world full of brutality and devastating loss. Do we respond to the stranger who could be dangerous, or do we walk away? We who know deeply what it means to be a stranger have been in this place too, where every unknown person could be a possible threat. It happens on the nights our heroes or community members are killed. Dr. King, Harvey Milk, Matthew Shepard, Brandon Tina, Lawrence Kane. Or it can happen in ordinary times when we're standing alone and feeling visible in broad daylight, when we're holding the hands of our beloveds in public, when we're sitting with our family members. When strangers approach, we must decide, as Cleopas did, whether we recoil away in protective fear or whether we face the stranger on the road in full openness. At first, Cleopas almost botches the whole encounter. Jesus asks a simple question, and Cleopas does what many of us do when we're afraid or uneasy. He tries to distance himself from the stranger by reinforcing the stranger's outsiderness. It is a desert. Cleopas is incredulous that anyone could visit Jerusalem and not know about Jesus' crucifixion. Who is this guy? Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who is unaware that these things have taken place? Cleopas tries to draw a line in the sand between those who know Jesus has been killed and those who don't. When those campus crusaders approached me in the quad, they tried to draw a line in the sand about being saved, and I didn't know how to make it a circle. So I recoiled and walked away, and both of us stayed locked in our strangeness. But perhaps in the moment Jesus asks the initial question and Cleopas' response, Cleopas remembers those ancient words of Leviticus. You shall love the stranger as yourself, for you were once strangers in the land of Egypt. In his first response, Cleopas caught himself forgetting that he was once a stranger who followed a man crucified for preaching against the status quo. He forgot that he was afraid he might have the same fate as his leader once he joined a band of outsiders. So he tried to distance himself from the one who approached him. But remembering the words of the Hebrew text, and that his hero constantly made room for those like him who exist on the margins, Cleopas and his friend take another chance and invite the stranger to dinner. In our post-10A world where it's possible that gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people can be ordained at the Presbyterian Church, I worry about two things. That we will forget that we were once strangers, or that we will try and think we are the only strangers to experience strangeness. I worry that when approached, we will recoil in remembrance of our fear rather than opening ourselves to new friendships and possibilities. I also worry we will stay locked in our myopic view of our strangeness that doesn't invite solidarity with those who are still on the margins. The past 5 years have turned the tide on welcome, acceptance, rights, and justice for gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer people. Suddenly, it is less daunting and devastating to come out to our committees for the preparation of ministry, or our COMs. In some states, we can marry our spouses and are protected by laws punishing others for violence or discrimination against us. And yet, we know that there are so many strangers among us still waiting to be recognized as fully human by our society, and as one of our own worth standing up for. When Jesus, Cleopas, and his pal sit down together at table, something amazing happens. Suddenly, their eyes are opened, and they are able to see Jesus for who he really is. We have all been on both sides of this table, as the one feeling strange, desperately wanting to be known, and the one who is blind to the stranger in our midst. What the journey to Emmaus reminds us is that the way to know the stranger is simple, through sharing stories and simple meals. Christ didn't celebrate the Eucharist in Emmaus, but this story reminds us that every meal has the potential to be an event where hospitality and table fellowship can become sacred occasions. In one simple sharing of bread and cup, the hurt and devastation of the followers of Christ was healed. Encountering the stranger caused their hearts to burn within them and rekindle their shared purpose to proclaim the gospel. As Christians, we have the opportunity to offer this healing bread of life to the strangers we encounter. We come together to the table in remembrance of the stranger, the outsider Christ, to whom we were never strange. We come to the table to share stories of our journeys, to preserve a bit of our weirdness as that which propels us onward, to bring together all of those marvelous, strange creatures of God so that we might be known together. less alone, less afraid. At this conference, we were invited to meet new strangers, make new friends, and to glimpse the work Christ calls us to among the transgender community, with those living with HIV and AIDS, for the weirdness experienced by those in our community as they grow old. As we leave this place, may our hearts burn with the memory of being strangers in a strange land, called by God to break bread together, so that we might know Christ in one another. Amen.
Amen.